So that's the good side of it. Go so fast. So initially, in early 60s, there are passwords, and then it evolved to tokens, device recognition, things like MAC address, IP addresses, they are on the devices, or hardware ID. And then in 2000s, it comes to the OTP, and then currently we are on the era of biometrics. So there are a lot of biometrics now which we are working with, and researchers also are doing research to more biometric authentication methods. So we'll see some of them later. On my discussion, on my presentation, I'll dig deep on biometric rather than passwords and tokens. So biometric, mobile biometric, or biometric refers to the unique biological traits of an individual for identity verification. So there are many types of biometrics. So I've chosen some, like fingerprint, facial, iris. There are other biometrics like palm vein, DNA, etc. So these biometrics, when used on mobile or mobile identity, they are improving user experiences. Instead of remembering complex passwords, you can just touch the phone with a finger, or you can just take your like a photo, facial recognition. So it simplifies life. So it makes things easy accessing the applications. And also enhance security, because biometrics are unique to each individual. And it broadens adoption to various industries. Now we are seeing that biometrics are used there on time attendance, door access control, on the borders that are e-gates, automatic gates, etc. So to strengthen security, we can use more than one authentication method. There is this concept of multi-factor authentication, like what do I have? For example, if I have a phone or a token or whatever, the thing which I have, I can combine it with what I know, PIN or password or security question, and then later I'll combine it to who I am. So it's like what I possess, what I know, and who I am. So who I am is any biometric mechanism can combine with them. This one is one of the multi-factor authentication is one of the very, very strong authentication methods.
Mr. Said, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, let me move fast. So mobile identity can be used on many places, in finance, banking, travel, those boarding passes, electronic tickets, e-commerce, etc. So there are many places can use it, biometric. These are some benefits of biometric, enhance the security, experience, etc. Most of them I've mentioned. The risk, one of the risks is privacy risk. There is somebody who, in the morning, presented ethical hack, so that it shows the movie that, if somebody steals your biometric, he or she can use its electronic biometric, he or she can use it on other places and forge as if he or she is you. And another challenge is technological barrier. As you know now, this is new technology also, still. It has a few years. With devices or mobile which has low specs, capturing biometrics are somehow difficult. So you might have a false authentication when using low-end devices to most of the biometric devices. Okay, because of time, let me finish with this case study of digital ID or electronic ID, let us assume that the government, any government, wants to create a robust, secure digital identity to the citizens. So one of the methods is enhancing it with a electronic identity. So citizens will have electronic IDs on their mobile phones, and then it will incorporate multi-factor authentications, including PIN and other authentication methods. Having electronic IDs will help citizens a lot in. Let me go to this page.
Okay, you have about one.
Okay, I'm finishing this page.
1 minute.
Okay, so having electronic IDs will help citizens in public services. It will make them to be efficient. It will reduce the need of paperwork, people to attend physically to the government offices. It will increase security and trust. It will reduce administrative costs, etc. So these are some of the benefits of electronic mobile identities. Lastly, future trends of the mobile identity. The domain is still evolving. So the existing biometrics, people are still improving efficiency, response time, and also they are trying to do some researches on the new biometric like DNA, ear shape recognition, palm vein, etc. And with incorporation with AI, they are doing behavior analysis. And other future trends is decentralization. Instead of having all biometric at the center, they are trying to push those biometric to the individual mobile phones. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Clap, hand clap, everybody. Put your hands together. Aya jamani, the time has come. This is the best time for me. Kuuliza maswali. Sasa, in IT, usually looking at your computers, I'm going to make sure I pick somebody randomly. Like the random GPG number. I hope it's random fully. I'll pick somebody randomly to ask, because we've presented here and we have experts. You might never get this chance again to understand how different technologies are implemented, and also ask questions where you don't understand. So I take this time to open up the discussion to the public after lunch. Shashiba, ausio. Marage nini? Chicha. Questions. Okay, the lovely lady over there, up there. Kuna question? Ame survive huyu. Nilikuwa nataka ku choose randomly. Ushers, please.
Okay, my name is Alan. I'm an IT expert and the IT consultant. I don't have a question, but I have like kama ushauri niseme.
Ndio.
Kuna hili wazo ambalo nilikuwa nafikiria muda mrefu la kwamba kwa nini tusiwe labda na electronic everything, kwamba cardless system, kwamba tutumie kuna system moja ambayo ita-integrate vitu vyote katika system moja. Kwa mfano leo hii nimetoka nyumbani, nimesahau leseni yangu nyumbani, nimekamatwa na traffic. Nafanyaje hapo? Kwa nini kusiwe na system moja ambayo itastore data zote ambazo mimi nitazihitaji wakati wote? Kwa mfano nimetoka nyumbani, nimefika kwa traffic, kanikamata, nitascan fingerprint yangu, atapata rekodi zangu zote kuhusu driving license yangu, ina expire lini, imetolewa lini, madaraja yangu, labda nimeenda hospitali, ina taarifa zangu zote za NHIF, yani passport yangu labda, NIDA yangu pia, yani in one system.
Good.
Sasa nilikuwa nafikiria hilo wazo labda Tanzania ndio hiyo nchi ya kwanza kutekeleza hicho kitu, kwa sababu unaona ma expert ambao wanahusika na hicho kitu. Sasa basi ngoja niongee hicho kitu. Asante.
Sawa. Sasa uko IT, wewe mtaalamu wa IT au?
Yeah.
Mtaalamu wa IT. Interoperability unaijua vizuri.
Yeah.
Anyway,
my doctor
you want to answer? Please do answer.
Actually, hiyo ndio dream ambayo tunataka kwenda. Na ukiangalia hii concept ambayo tunazungumzia hapa, the interoperability, ni how hii mifumo hii inaongeaje. Kwa mfano, unapokwenda kuongelea mtu anapotoka nyumbani kwake anakamatwa na polisi, anatoka anaenda hospitali, huyo mtu awe anatambulika kwenye mifumo yote. Kwa hiyo, lakini primary key ya kwanza kabisa lazima uweze kumuidentify huyo mtu. Na ndio maana tunasema lazima tuwe na unique ID yako. With your unique ID, wewe utakuwa huna haja ya kusumbuka saa zote kubeba leseni ya udereva, ubebe passport number. Just with your number, ukiwa tu na ile namba yako, maana yake inakuwa rahisi wewe kutambulika kwenye mifumo mbalimbali. Kwa hiyo with the theme na hii barabara ambayo sisi sasa hivi tunaelekea, huko ndio tunapotaka kufika. Kwa hiyo kwa mfano sasa hivi tumeanza kuintegrate hii mifumo. Kwa mfano kuna mfumo wa RITA, wa NIDA. Kwa hiyo maana yake inafika time wewe unataka national ID, huna haja ya kuulizwa lete cheti chako cha kuzaliwa, kwa sababu tayari kwenye system unakuwa umekuwa integrated. Na just to make it clear pia kingine, sasa hivi as a ministry through Digital Tanzania project tuna establish kitu tunaita one stop service center. Hizi one stop service center zinakuwa katika kila mkoa Tanzania, na so far tumeallocate mikoa hii vituo vya posta. Tunaanza kutumia hizo. Dar es Salaam hapa tayari imeanza, Tanga imeanza, Dodoma imeanza. Ukienda kwenye vituo vya posta unaweza ukapata baadhi ya huduma. Sasa lengo letu tulikuwa tunasema hivi, the concept ya one stop center iliyopo sasa hivi, mtu akikwambia unaenda one stop center, anajua wewe unakwenda kupata huduma lakini through multiple windows. Yani unaenda dirisha hili, unakutana na mtu wa NIDA anakuambia lazima kwanza upite kwa uhamiaji. So you go kwenye dirisha tena la uhamiaji. Sasa hii concept yetu sisi ya one stop center sasa hivi ndio hiyo ambayo inakuwa ni a single window. Kwa maana ya kwamba we don't want wewe kama mwananchi usumbuliwe. Unapokwenda kuchukua pasipoti yako unaambiwa nenda kwanza NIDA. Sasa ile window yako moja ile ndio tunaita sasa sisi ni one stop service center, one roof, lakini ni single window, sio multiple window. Kwa unapofika kwenye ile window moja unaweza ukahudumiwa kila kitu. And that is the concept ambayo we are actually in it. Na hivi vituo vimeanza kurun lakini kwenye modo ya multiple window, wakati tumeanza kuintegrate hii mifumo ili iende ikakae kwenye hizi one stop center. Na njia rahisi ambayo tumeiona hapa, huwezi kusema huduma zote ziwe kwenye window moja. Sometimes inabidi uangalie how do you do that. Kwa hiyo ndio maana tumezigawa kisekta, kwamba tuna sekta ya afya, basi hii sekta ya afya iwe na mfumo mmoja au miwili. Ukienda kwenye sekta ya elimu the same, ili baadaye hata kuja kuintegrate. Manake KIT unatengeneza tu portal, then you are done and dusted. Kwa hiyo ni framework nzuri sana ambayo sasa hivi sisi tumeshaanza ku-execute. Na development ya huo mfumo imeanza kwa maana ya hiyo digital identity. Baadaye tunakwenda ku-roll over kwenye hizo one stop center.
Thank you very much. Nadhani amejibu vizuri sana. Because of time, we have about 3 minutes or 4 minutes left. Nitaomba everybody in the panel to just summarize in about 1 minute. I'll start from Saeed. Mobile identity authentication, what's the use in simple words, how can it help people so that we can understand? Said, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. So I have one simple sentence that on this AI era, artificial intelligence era, the use of mobile identity is crucial, and many applications now captures our physical identities and store them on the mobile phone. So we need to be very careful when we are uploading our identities to the mobile devices because of the risk of it when it goes to the wrong hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bwana Mohammed Mashaka, it's always good to have you. In summary,
yes.
Do you want to summarize?
Yeah, just kwa kifupi tu, ili tutoke hapa tulipo, tuende kwenye ile era tunayozungumzia siku zote, digital economy, the digital transformation, lazima in mind tuwe na vitu vitatu. Lazima hivi vitu tunavyo-execute. In whichever way tutakavyo-execute, lakini ni vitu vitatu. Cha kwanza ni digital identity. Very important, lazima tutambuane. Number 2 is digital payment. Lazima tujue how do we make payment na hizi transaction kwenda kwenye ile cashless economy. Na number 3 ni data exchange. How do we share informations? So these are the 3 things ambazo nadhani tukiondoka navyo hapa, tukaangalia how are we going to execute basi ile digital transformation era nchini Tanzania, I hope tutakuwa kwenye stage nzuri sana. Thank you.
Aise, safi sana. Unajua tuna vichwa tuna vichwa serikalini rafiki yangu. Sawa. Would you like to explain that?
Yes, I would like to reflect on what Mr. Mashaka said earlier about the digital identity and that it should be issued when a person is born. Then this is exactly how it works in Estonia. When a child is born, when it's born in the hospital, then they will already get the identity number in the hospital, and they have the number before the name. This is your digital name, and the parents have actually 1 month to name the baby.
Wait a minute. Yani hapo lazima, let me just cut her short. They have the number before even naming the child.
Yes, so this is actually your digital name, and this is why we call it digital identity. So it's the unique identifier, and this is also what is very necessary to have a seamless interoperability, because each information system knows that you are you. You don't need to create multiple identities for the individual. Also, we do have this once-only principle. For example, if I have given my address to some information system already or some authority already, then the other institution cannot ask me the address, but they need to acquire it through X route. So this is the interoperability that helps us to avoid the data duplication as well. And I also wanted to comment about the legal framework that you were talking about, that you're working on. That's a very good step, because before having interoperability, you need to ensure the privacy and security, to sort out the consent management, user management, and all of the legal framework behind actually exchanging information, and also the rights between the organizations before we can actually start using the interoperability solutions. So this is the right way to start. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Go ahead. Do you want to go?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to actually reflect and conclude the way in which a digital ID is being construed. It is not only an identity of a person. How that identity can be leveraged across, so the use case which we are actually talking about, how he will be seamlessly able to use that particular thing, because digital identity acts as a proof of identity, proof of address, and also in-person verification. This is how we need to leverage those applications, how we need to do. Take in the example of a simple hospital management where identity is required. If you are actually taking about a banking where all 3 are required, and so on and so forth. So how we will leverage this particular thing, the first and foremost is the government to actually create the framework, the legal. I resonate with the talk which has been done. The thought process which the government is actually creating, you need to create the framework associated with that. Technology is already available in various forms. We need to actually create those particular things. We need to bring all those technology elements together, but create those ecosystem wherein it could be easily integrated to create the open APIs or open data exchange. So he has actually mentioned very clearly about that three pieces. Create the presenceless layer, identity layer, you create the paperless layer, the payments layer, and also the consent layer where the data exchange is actually happening. Create this framework so that this can really give the power to transform the country into truly digital. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We've had very, very brilliant people. If you've not understood pole sana, muulize tena. But we've had a very good panel discussion. Thank you very much, my panelists. And I'm going to hand over to... I'm handing over. Ma photographer vipi? Kama kawaida au mmetubagua sisi?
Asante Peter Baziwe na panelists wako kwa presentation nzuri. You have taken us through platforms, interoperability and digital identity, numbers for development. Let's group photo. Thank you very much. Asante sana. We are now going to have a lecture on a digitization for local economic opportunity. This lecture will discuss the opportunities brought by digitalization in the local context. May I take this opportunity to welcome Dr. George Mulamula. Karibu sana utupitishe. We are going to have half an hour from now. Half an hour.
Half an hour?
Yeah. Okay, fine.
Good afternoon, everybody. Habari za mchana. Sawa. We have only half an hour and the topic was so interesting I thought we'll get 1 hour. Lakini sasa we have to squeeze. Can I call Edward Anderson to come up? Nafikiri you already know, you have already seen him. He was here on the stage today. He was here with us yesterday. So I don't think he needs any introduction. And he works with the World Bank, but he doesn't have any money to give at the moment, if you're thinking of that. Let me hand over to you, Edward. So he'll make a presentation, and then we'll have a small fireside chat. And then if there's any Q&A within that time, we'll leave 5 minutes towards the end for a Q&A session in case you want to ask or get some clarity. His presentation is going to be very interesting. It's localizing the issue of digitalization in terms of use cases. I hope that's your presentation. Karibu.
Thank you, Dr. Mulamula. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to you. I hope you're all not too exhausted from a long day. I lead a program called the Digital Earth Partnership on behalf of the World Bank based in Washington, D.C. And so I'd like to talk to you about sort of 3 levels of digitization leading to local economic opportunity, starting from sort of the space level that we touched on in a session just after lunch, the AI applications and how they can be developed, and then really talking about local community applications. So a couple of points to make to begin with, and this is really talking about spatial data, environmental data, human settlement data. In a fast-growing economy, in a rapidly changing environment, particularly a low-income or low-resource environment, almost by definition, you are data-constrained and expertise-constrained. And this has consequences to how you can invest, Often in the World Bank, we invest where we can measure things. And if there are no measurements, the investment doesn't come, or the investment is more expensive than it otherwise would be, and is limited in the value because you can't build in a lot of preventative elements. So we see that a dollar invested in prevention is worth $16 avoided in disaster losses in the future. But if we cannot measure the risks, we are not in places. So that's one point. And to bring it to a local context, maybe most of you are familiar with, I spent many years working in Dar es Salaam, and one of my jobs was to figure out the resilience of the Mzimbazi Basin and the Jangwani. We saw that the bus rapid transit was a flagship transport network. We saw the BRT bus depot was being flooded as soon as it opened every year. And we realized that this is part of the complexity of the flooding, is it's not just more rainfall is more flooding. Actually, there was the same rainfall. But it's because Western expansion of the city was creating deforestation, was creating erosion, was creating sedimentation, combined with waste collection that is filling the drainage canals and the rivers, was leading to a lot more sedimentation in the basin and not going out to sea. So the river levels were rising, but this was not being measured. So when the bus depot was built, it was 1.8 meters above the floodplain, or at least when it was designed. When it was opened, it was 20 centimeters below the floodplain. So this was ultimately a problem of data. And we needed all sorts of data. Scientific modeling based on satellite data, but also community data, as well as local point of interest data, infrastructure conditions data, historical events data. A second kind of traditional challenge when there's very little data is we tend to, if we're going to do a project, we overcompensate by hiring the best science models and the most expensive engineering companies to try and give us some kind of reduction in the risk or the uncertainty. So we often hire international experts. These two gentlemen worked for me. They're very, very good. This is actually under the Selender Bridge here in the city center of Dar es Salaam. But the problem with these gentlemen is they're not cheap, and they're not scalable, and you can't afford to send them every 6 months or every year to the Dar es Salaam project. And certainly what would you do in Tanga and Lindi and Mtwara and the smaller cities who are changing very fast, right? So this is kind of bringing a Ferrari to a country road where you have poor gasoline. And it's difficult to update, and it's difficult to replicate in other contexts. Next. So our strategy in terms of digitization and accelerating digitization is to leverage the sort of new opportunities out there. We heard about space, satellites, but also drones, and there's a lot of exciting data there. Then how we turn that into analytics. The AI revolution, I think, is really crucial in terms of automating and making it faster and cheaper to extract information. Where are the buildings? Where are the trees? What are the conditions of the crops or the roads? And finally, the local context, and I'll really get into local opportunities at the end. So next. So from space, next please. There is really a whole low Earth orbit revolution. These are just European Space Agency satellites. We have a partnership with the European Space Agency, and they provide free and open data and open methodologies. And they have the Copernicus program. Anyone can go and access and register and try to use it, but it's quite scientific and quite technical. Next, please. And what it is just this deluge of data, 250 terabytes of Earth observation data every day. How do we make sense of it? How do we design our systems around it? This is becoming increasingly standardized, but now we have to think at the national level, how do we build programs that are going to last 5 or 10 years on these satellites that we don't own, we don't control? Will they still be providing this data in the future? Next, please. So some of the derived products from this that I think are very exciting is to automate the tracking of the built environment. We call this human exposure. So this is a map of New Cairo City. It's a planned development outside of Cairo in Egypt. And you can see in yellow buildings in the last 6 months. Normally, when we're looking at this kind of data, it's 6 years old. So we're trying to design for the city of 6 years ago. So being able to have up-to-date information of where are the settlements, where are the people, is really important. And you can see it's quite a regulated, quite planned layout. And one of the buildings in the top right is the new African Space Agency that I mentioned in the earlier session. Next, please. But when we look at Dar es Salaam, it's hard to find where the planned settlements are happening, right? It's much more sprawl, it's much more expansive. It's what we call land-intensive development. So this kind of more up-to-date picture can help us put a hotspot on which neighborhoods, which wards and sub-wards are changing the fastest. Where are the hotspots? Next, please. Other things we can do from space. This is an optical image of Nairobi. Next. We can get the land surface temperatures, and these are getting more and more accurate, higher resolution. And this is becoming an increasing problem as cities urbanize. They're getting hotter. You have the urban heat island effect combined with changing climate and more heat waves. This is going to be a problem for the next 10 years that we need to plan for. Next, please. So how do we make this relevant to local context? This is where AI can be very useful to automate large amounts of data mining, but we need to have local capacity to validate it, to train it, to really query or ground truth it. Next, please. I'll give some examples of working with AI from Tanzania. Starting with drones. When you're mapping the buildings from space, you can't tell what the building is for. Is it a residence? Is it a commercial shop? Is it an M-Pesa agent? Is it a government office? Is it a school? And you can't tell really what the construction status is. But in this image from a drone from 2017 in Zanzibar, you can see the foundation of the building, you can see a building that's still under construction, and you can see a fully complete building. So we had university students digitize 160,000 buildings manually, and they used this data set to train an AI to do two things. To automatically classify the building roof print, the shape of the roof, to identify where is the building and what shape is it. And then second of all, to categorize inside that shape. Is this a completed building, a building under construction, or a foundation? And for the Commission of Lands, this is really useful for regulating land. You need a permit for construction, you need to be registered with a building reference number and a property valuation and taxes for a completed building. But also when we see where the foundations are, we have a map of the future urban settlement. People might wait 10 years to get the money to build the roof and the plumbing. So a map of settlement of foundations in a place like Tanzania can be very powerful as an indication not just of the settlement of today, but the settlement of the future. Next, please. And so this was, in overall, there were 500,000 buildings. 160,000 were digitized by humans and the rest done by the AI. And then we have a good sense of how accurate the AI is. Next. Other applications. So this is work done under a program called Resilience Academy, but you see students here from Sokoine University digitizing a satellite image of the trees, or of the city, but they're digitizing the canopy of the trees. So what we want is an AI to automatically count trees, or at least count the change in urban forest canopy. Are the trees being deforested? And we think about 10% per year in the Mzimbazi Basin were being deforested in the last 5 years. But an AI can kind of count that, but we have to train it with Tanzanian data, and we have to validate it in Tanzania. So the students go out and they count the trees, and they tell what kind of tree it is, and they digitize the image, and then they use this to train the artificial intelligence. Next, please. Heat. So we saw land surface temperatures from space can be very accurate. We can also model the air temperature, the ambient air temperature. But the heat stress depends on what you're interested in. For affecting the indoor heat, and it's also the indoor wet bulb temperature. So it depends on humidity and heat that really threatens the health and the learning in schools. So we can also combine with citizen science methods. So these two ladies are on a motorcycle in Bandung in Indonesia, collecting what's called forward-looking infrared camera data. So we're getting local data inside the buildings from the street level and combining it with the satellite. And the AI can do two things. We can use AI to downscale the heat model to make it cheap to have a city level or neighborhood level map, because if we just use the science models, it's still quite expensive. But we can also use the AI to estimate for a particular building characteristic what's the indoor temperature likely to be, which is a function of the building's materials, the roof material, and the inhabitants. Next. So an application in Tanzania we're trying to kick off at the moment, which I think is very exciting, is we know we have evidence that for every 1 degree temperature above 30 degrees, the learning reduces by 2% in schools. So there's a direct link between heat stress and exam results and the child health. We've also seen that if you paint the roof white, it can reduce on average the temperature by 3.6 degrees and by a maximum of 5 degrees in the really hot schools. If you paint the roof blue, it doesn't make any difference. So for me, it's always surprising. I see a lot of blue roofs in Tanzania and not that many white roofs. And I'm wondering, is the white paint that expensive? So with the AI, we can do several things. We can look at an optical image and try to infer the characteristics of the roof. Is this a very rusty, corrugated metal roof that would benefit from being painted white? And we can also try to estimate the indoor temperature of the school based on the land temperature, the air temperature, and the parameters of the school. So we can come up with a quantitative estimate of the 25,000 schools in Tanzania. How many should we paint the roof white? It's a simple question, but it's quite complicated to calculate, and it could have a huge impact. Next, please. And one of the final AI applications I want to get into is flood forecasting and early warning. So this is also from Tanzania. We had a problem in the Mzimbazi that there were no instruments. So when we went to forecast the flood, when will the Jangwani Bridge be flooded? When will the bus depot be flooded? We were recommended by the experts to get these $36,000 devices called acoustic Doppler current profilers. And we thought, well, it's very complicated. You've got to take it out on a boat. It's expensive. Then we went with a radar station that is $10,000, which worked for a while until the solar panel was stolen, and then the radar didn't work. But then we sort of said there must be a cheaper way. And so these are security cameras for $250, and you can point it at a staff gauge or just a ruler in the river. And from an image, you can calculate the depth. And from a video file, next please, you can actually calculate the velocity of the stream flow across the surface. So if you have the profile of the river, you can now automatically, with the AI, calculate current river discharge in uninstrumented rivers. So this started as a master's research project in Tanzania in 2018, 2019. It then went to the Netherlands, and it then went to, in 2021, it went to Luxembourg and Brazil and in Canada, some of these images. So it's been commercialized, it's been developed, and this algorithm has now been applied to video from satellites in space on big rivers in the Amazon. But the question I have is why is it not in Tanzania again? It started here. It's also being used in Zambia. So this was developed with local masters research local rivers. It's an open source algorithm, but it could be a commercial service. Next, please. So these are all projects under sort of the Resilience Academy space using AI and Earth imaging data. So it requires some skills, but it's not very advanced skills. These are students from bachelor's programs in environment, in geography, and urban planning, and computer science. So these are skills that exist in Tanzania, but they're nevertheless bachelor's level skills. Next. So now I want to talk about sort of unskilled local community opportunities, the key point of the talk. So I'm going to give some examples from a project we call Digital Public Works that has been piloted in Kenya in 3 informal settlements. So the idea here is that much like civil works where you pay citizens to clean the streets or clean out the drains and collect the trash and they get a small stipend, collecting data about the communities is also a public action. The government needs this data, and there are many citizens that can be involved and can be very effective in collecting this kind of information. So we're interested in high-quality urban geographic data that traditionally we might hire an engineering company to go and do. Next. So there are different kinds of data collection and different kinds of methods and skills involved. There's digitizing features from an image, and you saw some of the examples from the drone and from the tree canopy. There's collecting street view level data that you can't get from above, like this gentleman with the 360 camera. There's asking citizens to verify tasks, so swiping left or right on an image if you see a M-Pesa shop in the picture, for example. Collecting feedback from surveys from citizens, and other points of interest. Next, please. So we had a 2-week application, over 900 people applied. We ended up selecting 300 people for the pilot, and it's a majority women, and over 12% of them had disabilities of some kind. So it's particularly targeted at local residents who are young or who are disabled, who are unable to work and who are underemployed across the skills range. Next, please. And then you see some of the statistics. Next. So what happens? Depending on the tasks are assigned to take roughly 2 to 4 hours per day. So if you're very fast, you do it in 2 hours. If you're very slow, it might take you a bit longer. And you get a base stipend or fee for completing all the tasks to a basic level, and it's about 11, there's a typo, I think it's about 11,000 shillings per 3-hour level of effort. But if you do good quality, if you're consistently in the top 30, 20, or 10%, you get quality bonuses. And if you're in the top 10%, you normally finish quickly, you get the opportunity to do an extra couple of hours of tasks because you've done it very quickly. So you can earn extra. So you can earn up to 15,000 shillings per day. Next. So it's quite small budgets, but the idea is you get some training, you get some skills, and it can lead to other opportunities as well as creating data. So on the digitization of the images, 31 youth were able to do 350,000 buildings. Next, please. On the digitization of community points of interest, 61 youth were able to get over 30,000 points of interest, or 10,000 points of interest, but lots of different details and attributes. So this is sort of what it looks like. On the right, you see the roof footprint that's been digitized, but the color corresponds to an attribute about that building. Is this a commercial building, a residential building, a hairdressers, or a water point, and other information like that? Do they have a water connection or a toilet? Next, please. And then terrestrial, of course, this was fewer people, but you can actually get into the neighborhoods, into those areas that are hard to drive. I know that Tanzania has a Street View program, and Google had some cars with cameras, but you can't take a Google Street View car through these areas, right? Next, please. So it can be a GoPro camera, it can be a 360 camera. They become much, much cheaper these days. And this is really, really powerful data for planning drainage, for planning road upgrades, for getting into these areas that often don't get a lot of attention. And this is kind of what it looks like when it's stitched together. You have this street level view. Next, please. And I mentioned the microtasking. So this particular example, there's an image, and if you can see on the phone, it says, can you see an M-Pesa shop in the image, yes or no? So it's a very simple task. Anyone who sort of knows their neighborhood can essentially do this if they have a phone and they have basic digital literacy. So with this area, there are over 250 people engaged with over 1.3 million tasks, creating attributes about the physical spaces. Next, please. Household surveys require a little bit more training, a little bit more skills, but again, 40 youth were engaged in over 684 households to get... in the case of Tanzania, we did, for example, flood histories. Because we didn't have a satellite archive of how many times the Mzimbazi Basin had been flooded, when we hired experts to do a flood model, we need to qualify the model. So we went to 35,000 households and asked them, how many times have you been flooded in the last 10 years? Were you flooded up to your ankles, up to your knees, up to your chest, above your head? And in doing this, because you have such a large number of households telling you, you can create a statistical database that is synthetic flood histories. And that can be used to calibrate a flood model. So this is community knowledge being digitized and then being used for the city planning. So this is what the government gets, a kind of basic dashboard with things like buildings and use cases that is important for revenue collection and planning. Next. And for also demonstrating where the investments are going to be, what the conditions are, who has waste management, who has water, who has power. Next. And what some of the impacts might be. So you can imagine in the case of flooding, which houses have been flooded, for example, which helps plan the drainage. Next. And being able to see if you have a query about a particular hotspot, what's the local data that we've been able to collect and query it. So the government is a big beneficiary because this data is faster and cheaper and I think sometimes more accurate than we might otherwise get when we go to an external consultant. But the communities get three benefits. They get involved in the projects that are affecting their communities. So there's an awareness built, there's a sort of stakeholder process. They obviously get income, not a huge amount of income, but then they're not working full-time. This is part-time earnings. They're getting some skills. They're being exposed to the gig economy. They're being given accounts for how to edit things online. And there are commercial marketplaces that will hire you to go and do marketing data and surveys and collect point of interest data. So if you're very good at this, you can go and earn extra money on some of these other platforms like Upworks. So skills, income, engagement, and awareness. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You can come and sit now. We have been studying for a long time. Sit over here on my left. The presentation has been centered. We've got about 6 minutes. It's been centered around data. So, and data is everything. As we know, the largest companies in the world are making money, the profitable ones, because of data. Look at Uber, look at B&B, look at Google. It's just around data. So now my question is, just to get your thoughts, for a Tanzanian startup, how can they monetize data? Because you've talked about the methodology, how you can get the data, but once you get the data, and what kind of data, how can a startup use that data to make money, in your view?
Well, I think there's a lot of potential ways this can go. And the challenge is sometimes data is sort of behind these sort of gates, if you like, where government considers it to be official statistics and it's still in process, and they don't want to release it until the project is final and then the data is a bit old. So there's an opportunity cost at the time of the data. But if you can get to add value quickly, there's the public market. And what we saw, I didn't mention here, but in Tanga, for example, I know that a project has been going where young people are digitizing the government maps and then going to update the land uses and helping the government raise revenues, because people now have to pay permits to change the land use, so they have to pay a fee. And so the young people are saying, well, we should be getting a commission. We should get a proportion of this fee because we are the ones going out and updating all of this land use information. So that's a business model. I'm not sure if it'll work. On the private sector, it tends to be quite specific proprietary information that they're after. Where are my competitors? If I'm a mobile money agent, where are the other Wakala agents? Where is my potential customers? And so you have to be quite dynamic and I think quite entrepreneurial, but knowing your community is the local advantage, right? Or if you're going to use an AI, having a good understanding of the fitness of the open classifier you might use and how you can customize it with a proprietary data set. So there are lots of AIs to look at agriculture, but maybe not very good at something like sisal plants. And in Tanzania, we have sisal plantations, so you could take a lot of images of sisal, spend a lot of time training it, and that becomes your proprietary piece of an agriculture service, which you could then sell to farms, for example. So I think that this is a very fast-changing environment. I think there's no sort of clear and obvious big moats or business models on data. But if you have either access to specific communities or proprietary data sets you can add value to a bigger system for, or if you have access to a customer base where you understand their needs and you can get on top of the tools that are out there, all of those are very legitimate ways to add value. What I presented here is a way in which very unskilled people can already add value because they know the street name, they know if it floods, they know if there's an M-Pesa agent in this corner or not. And when they start to pick that up, they can then go to gig economy sort of platforms. Mechanical Turk is something Amazon started many, many years ago. And they can start to do jobs online. They can digitize images from across the world if they want to, as an individual. As a business, I think it makes sense to try and build a comparative advantage in a market that you really understand.
So, in other words, what you're presenting here also for the youth, then, it's an issue of micro skills, micro work and skills, whereby they get scaled up. Because skills are very important in order to do your data analysis and so forth.
Yeah, so I mean, what I presented here is really a paradigm shift in how we think of the public sector as a market maker. So normally the public sector is a client of technical consulting works where the consultant creates the data as an input to a deliverable, which might be the drainage master plan or the road settlement upgrading plan. And very few people see the data except the consultant. If the government were to think of data as a public asset, to say, we want the drainage master plan, you will still do the model, but you give us the data as well, and we make it open and we allow other people to use it, you're creating a market there. And if you go one step further and say, okay, the consultant will do the analysis, but we want local people and local companies to do the data collection, they get the skills. So then the government gets the plans, the data, the people get the skills, they get a little bit of income. And if you can then connect it to the commercial marketplaces, you have this hybridization. You have the public sector driving basic data collection and public data or public goods, like street addresses and basic infrastructure. And then you have the private sector coming on top and asking for more value-added things, like the marketing of business opportunities, who's got banking access, who's got particular sort of transport access, who's got particular services, and this would be a commercial data effort.
Before I ask, we've got 4 more minutes before we have to close. Do we have any question from the audience? Does anyone have a question? Going once, going twice, going thrice. No question. Okay, sawa. Naona mmelewa. Kwa hiyo to the startups here then, we have the NAPA system. And I think that's a starting point in terms of data, in terms of doing business, in terms of wealth creation. The only thing you have to do is be innovative and be creative. So, last words before we end?
I mean, it's a cliche, but I think the world is your opportunity. I think there are so many young people in Tanzania. I think all of the challenges really are just opportunities. And I think with digital, the exciting thing is doing things differently. So leapfrogging. And I think the most exciting thing what I presented is not the drone or the AI or the satellite, but it's the change in mindset and business model. So if we can work together, if we can see the communities and the universities and the private sector as all potential partners, you're creating a whole new ecosystem here that will be more sustainable and I think far more efficient.
With those last words, I want to thank you. Please give him a big hand. And, Mongi, you're there. Shafika, okay, fine. And then we can also get up. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, before you leave, Dr. Mulamula, we need to take a photo with your panelists. Panelists, is that a panelist, the two of you? Okay, wapiga picha mpo? Thank you very much, Dr. Mulamula. Makofi mengine kwake. First of all, I have to apologize. We had promised we'll do our best at least by now. We would have finished, but we still have 1.5 sessions, if I may say so. We have 2 sessions left. One is on emerging digital technologies use cases. And this will be moderated by Mr. Jason Danguzi from the ICTC. This is supposed to be a 1 hour, but please, could you yield at least 35 minutes from your time? So we are giving you 25 minutes, if at all.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mungi. I'll try my level best to take into consideration the time constraint we have, but so at the moment I'd like to call my panelists to this session. The first one will be Mr. Harish Bhatt. I don't know if he's around. Oh yes, thank you. Save time, I won't introduce you, but you introduce yourself during your presentations. Professor Oreku, please come in front. Dr. Haji Fimbombaya, Mr. Paul Makobi, is he around? Sir Paul Makobi. Oh, he hasn't. Are you here? Oh, he hasn't arrived. So we'll proceed. Now at least, on his absence now, we've saved 5 minutes already. Thank you. So straight to the session, maybe I'll call upon Mr. Harish Bhatt to start with your presentation. Studio, please. Can you put Mr. Harish's Bhatt presentation? Thank you. Please introduce yourself. What's your presentation about? Then we'll proceed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can I have the presentation, please? Thank you. So this afternoon I'm going to talk not necessarily about what SoftTech does. I'm going to focus a little bit more on the main theme of this session in terms of emerging technologies and their impact. A very quick introduction of myself. My name is Harish Bhatt. I'm the Managing Director of Softec Consultants. Softec is a 30-year-old company in Tanzania. We were the people who started first with implementation of the banking systems in the year 1988. We also implemented the government financial management systems in the year 97, which was in use until a couple of years back. And we have done similar work in many other sub-Saharan African countries. Some of the work we do is around financial management systems. We do a lot of work around cybersecurity, data analytics. It was interesting to see a small talk on drones, so we offer it as a service. Besides that, we do what we call conversational artificial intelligence and so on. So there's a range of services we offer. But this afternoon, I'm going to focus on the core of what is the main purpose. So when we talk about emerging technologies, I want to start off with a statistic which says that when we look at the, So when we look at the emerging technologies, what is going to be the impact? And that's what my address this afternoon is about. So there are many numbers and there are many estimates being thrown around across the world. One of them says that 75 million jobs will be displaced, 133 million jobs will be created. And the issue really is now to talk about the division between the labor between humans, machines, and algorithms. So the question is, will technology transform our world? Absolutely. The bigger question is, how do we drive job creation and socio-economic development? So let us take a look at some Thank you. So the World Economic Forum report of 2023 asked a lot of questions around what exactly is going to lead transformation of organizations, whether it's government or business. And the biggest thing, a lot of people say that it's going to be the adoption of new and frontier technologies, about 86% of that. That was followed by the broadening of the digital access and then some other things. So we can very quickly see that digital technologies are actually at the forefront of leading transformation, business transformation, or even government transformation in this world. The next question the World Economic Forum tried to answer is, so which emerging technology is going to be important? Now, there is a very, very long list of emerging technologies out there, but highest on the list at about 86% was digital platforms and apps, and then you can see educational delivery systems, big data analytics. We just saw a very good example of big data analytics, IoT devices, cloud computing, and so on. Now, there is no definitive list in the world. Most of this comes from surveys and opinions of people across the world. So what I'm giving you is the view from the World Economic Forum. Now, the next question is, so who exactly can predict what is going to happen? And the answer to that is no one. Neither the technology skeptics or the optimists can predict the future. How technology is adapted and will eventually be used at present is unpredictable. People might think that this technology is excellent for something and eventually it is used for something totally different, not what it was originally meant for. And sometimes realizing the potential can take a very long period of time. So when we talk about Africa, there's a lot of talk about, let's talk about Africa. Actually, it means nothing because Africa is made up of so many countries whose needs, economic development stages, etc., are so very different. So how technology will be adapted will vary across all these economies. But there are certain things which are becoming very common. So let's take a look at one of the things that the World Economic Forum found out. As of 2022, if you look at the proportion of tasks that have been taken up by machines or algorithms or computers is estimated at 34%. 66% is still human. As of 2027, which is 5 years from now, it is predicted that the machines, the algorithms, will be performing 43% of the work, and the human part will remain at, wow, this is difficult. I'm sorry. Am I going back, forth? Wow, this is interesting. Somebody can help me, please? Go ahead. Ahead, not back, ahead. Yes, please, ahead. Ahead. Yeah. So, based on the assessment that was done by the World Economic Forum, it is estimated that by the year 2027, 43% of a lot of the tasks will be done by machines or by algorithms, and 57% will be done by humans. Next, please. So now we have a big question. The biggest thing people worry is that, oh my God, if this is what happens, a lot of jobs will be lost. So I have tried to say what are some of the direct economic impacts that the emerging technologies can have. So we talk about IoT. What has IoT done? Well, it has led to home automation, industrial IoT, healthcare monitoring devices. I wear a Apple which tells me how many steps I've done, so many other types of devices. Blockchain has given us cryptocurrency, supply chain efficiencies, smart contracts, digital identity, and so on. AI, I will not repeat. The previous speaker gave us a very good example. But others are things like autonomous vehicles, conversational artificial intelligence platforms which we implement, and so on. But at the same time, it is also creating new jobs, jobs whose titles today you might not have heard. So for example, we will have smart contract auditors. We have auditors today, but you're likely to have smart contract auditors. Or you are going to have artificial intelligence ethicists. Now somebody will ask me, what does that mean? It actually means if we are going to use artificial intelligence, who is going to look at ethics? How are we going to handle ethics when it comes to artificial intelligence? These are going to be the new jobs that are coming up. So emerging technologies displace a lot of jobs, but they will also create a lot of jobs. Next, please. So how many? The World Economic Forum report of 2023 says that 44% of the people will need to change their core skills. Literally half the working population will need to change their core skills because they might no longer be relevant going ahead. There will be job losses, so as you see in the second diagram there, and there will be new jobs, and 23% of the jobs which were there today will no longer be there, and they'll be replaced by something else. So this is a bit scary, but at the same time, this is part and parcel of every initiative. I remember when I started implementing a banking system at NBC in 1988. At that time, that branch had 150 staff, and they used to use ledger cards and signature cards, and you would go, you take your money, and somebody go and looks for a card, and to serve a customer was a long time. Once we implemented the system, the staff requirement dropped to 30. This was the first branch, from 150 to 30. Now, the idea is not to be scared with that, because since then, banks have been automated, but they've employed more marketing people, they've employed more representatives, they've employed more analysts, they've employed more services which are designed for people. So these things happen. There is nothing unusual about it, but the change will be there. Next, please. Next. Yeah, thanks. In addition to the direct economic impact, there is also something we call surplus impact, or the non-direct economic effect. So let us take some examples of non-direct economic impacts. One of them is that people will need to be trained, and they will need to be retrained. We just heard very quickly in the last presentation, there will be a new place for market. There will be a data marketplace. People will be selling, instead of oranges and stuff, you start selling data. And there will be a market for selling data. There will be many other impacts that will come through. If the supply chain is on blockchain, it is a lot safer, it is not subject to fraud. Energy trading platforms will make it cheaper, easier, more transparent, and so on. We are talking about smart cities. The idea is to make them safer, make them cheaper, to reduce the costs, and so on. These kind of impacts are generally known as indirect economic or surplus economic effects. Next, please. We also have to look at the social impact of emerging technologies. So, for example, So, for example, healthcare. Healthcare with 5G and other technologies will enable provision of service to remote places and consultancy where that was not available in the past. That's just a social impact of the technology. We are increasingly going to see virtual reality being used in education. We already know simulation for pilots is there. How about simulation for surgeons? And how about simulation for other people? So there are going to be a wide range of applications of this kind of educational technologies, and all of these will have a social impact. In going towards the end of my presentation, there are also going to be risks and challenges. So what are going to be the risks? When we have data, we have to know who provided this data, because data can be biased, and therefore your decisions can be biased. One of the words you might see there is called explainability. Now, before somebody starts correcting my English, what it actually means is that most people don't even know how their artificial intelligence engines work. You ask a designer, how is it working? They don't know. And what you don't know is a huge risk. So there are going to be risks, there are security issues, there are data privacy issues. Who is going to control data privacy? With so much of artificial intelligence, so much of personal data, so much of stuff moving around, privacy issues are going to become very critical. In terms of challenges, we have a talent gap. Doing all these nice, wonderful things is going to need a lot of computing power, a lot of investment. Regulations. What are the regulations around artificial intelligence? We don't know. Nobody knows. Everybody's still thinking, how are we going to regulate artificial intelligence? And there are issues around interoperability. That was a subject that was already addressed. And there are lack of standards. What are the standards we are going to follow for IoT, for artificial intelligence, for many? Where are the standards? Who designs these standards? How do we adhere to standards? So, very briefly, exciting times. Things will change. Jobs will be lost. Jobs will be created. More people will need to be re-educated on various things. There is an economic impact, definite. There is also the spillover or surplus impact in terms of non-economic. We have to be aware of the social changes. We have to take the risks and the various challenges into consideration. But the fact that we are headed for change is inevitable. Thank you very much. That is the fastest I've ever managed to do such a presentation. So
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Hari. That's short and clear. So we have two sides of a coin here. On the first day, second day, first day we are talking about women in ICT. We spoke about youth in ICT. We have presentations yesterday about cybersecurity. Today we had a lecture on AI economy, all those opportunities which we need to to leverage so that we can gain from the emerging technologies. But there's another challenge of losing jobs amid emerging technologies. And there are three main challenges which he pointed out about regulatory compliances, computational skills, and general skills in all the area of emerging technologies. So how do we look at those challenges? At what scale can we address those challenges so that we can leverage emerging technologies and not lose our jobs? That's the question. I leave it to you. So on a quick presentation to the next presentation, we are talking about the leverage of AI in education, particularly higher learning education. May I invite Professor Oreku? He has a very short presentation. He told me a one-slide presentation which tells the whole story about the subject in discussion. Welcome, Prof.
Thank you, moderator. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Yohana Salimia.
Yeah, people are tired, you know. This time, always very difficult to get people are tired. Listening from morning to the evening, it's not an easy task. Yes, I'm not going to take much of your time, but I'll get you involved. I got only one slide. I'm not going to use only one slide and to make sure that I transact all my message across. So without much ado, I'd like to get you involved in my presentation. I'll not dwell much on my profile, introducing myself, but I do believe each one of us have a smartphone. So my name goes by that as it is indicated there. So if you want to know a lot about me, just type the name in your smartphone and that will be covered. I hope this thing is working. So my title is A Way Forward, Leveraging Artificial Intelligence in Higher Education. I'm going to confine my discussion on the academic aspect. Yes, it's across, it's a talk of town. Everybody is preaching, talking about artificial intelligence. But I do believe, I stand to be corrected, that I don't know if preaching from morning to evening will turn someone to a saint, but rather taking an action. So that's why I just try to minimize few words, but get them into action. If I could go back one by one so that I flow with I don't have a control here, so I don't know. Yes. Before we make sense out of what we call artificial intelligence, there are some of the critical issues we really need to look upon. These are very critical issues which, if are not well taken care of, we will be just seeing artificial intelligence as a spectators but not participants. Number one, when you talk about African higher educations, we really need to conceptualize in institution assessment of the AI readiness. On the AI readiness, before you embark in, to make sense out of it, we really need to know what are the institutional assessments which are needed to be in place before we use these skills to embark on what we call artificial intelligence. Otherwise, it will be just talk of town. Number one, when you talk about IE readiness, we really need to determine the level of correspondence among staff as far as artificial intelligence is concerned, evaluate the readiness of our students on how are they ready to take over. Analyze the institutional expertise. How much expertise do we have within the institutions before we embark to these AI, their capabilities? Identify policy and the governance gaps. What are the government gaps might hinder the AI integration? And eventually, on the same aspect of the institutional assessment, we really need to look on the contextualizing constraints which should be cutting across as a country or as Africa as well. Next. Awareness and the capacity building programs. Do we really have these programs and awareness within our institutions? This goes in two aspects. You really need to check on staff as well as students' side. On the staff, you have to analyze the host institutions' conversations online platforms which can create the space for people to chat around, develop customized training, which actually taking people from level of literacy to the level of proficiency. This needs to be in place before we start embarking into artificial intelligence. Move from the integrated training, but to academic staff support and the ICT applications and hands-on on the artificial intelligence aspects. Develop training and hands-on practices. That is when you talk about your staff. You make sure that you develop all those skills. On the side of students, you need to develop and implement training from foundation, from literacy, like I said, to the proficiency. Develop an open library where people could dwell on, create some sandbox and try their ideas within the area. Empower students and take active role in integrating artificial intelligence. That is when you try to create awareness and the capacity building programs within the institutions. Number 3 is curriculum integration and enhancements as well as delivery. Integration of artificial intelligence into existing academia horizon. This have to be looked on what is existing already in our universities or institutions. And how do we get all these AI incorporated in our common subject we have, like computer science, engineering, agriculture, healthcare, and humanities. And then we need to capitalize in AI interdisciplinary approach, innovation thinking, and problem solving into really world challenges which are existing. We have to look on the aspect of curricular enhancement. When you look on curricular enhancement, AI ability to design and teach material, course lines, course outlines, etc. Design assessments on how you are going to assess your students on the AI concepts. Move from AI generation skills creation to generated value, evaluated critical thinking space. Develop an AI work, integrated learning skills within the curriculum. On the content delivery, you really need to have a professionalism learning environments on adaptive learning. You have to develop create labs which are more got to do with artificial intelligence, simulations, and a platform which can give space for the people to train and put their hands on. Next, yes. Research and innovation is another aspect which really need to be looked at. Establish interdisciplinary artificial intelligence centers which could spear academic support and ICT practices. You need to develop AI models and the tools to support local languages, dialects, and African languages which can create some collaboration within. Translate and adapt existing artificial intelligence education resources aligned to what institution or university is teaching. Develop partnership and collaboration. It's not a one-man show, but you really need to embark on benchmarking your artificial development with the other part of the world. Next, please. Data infrastructure and scalability. Leveraging on the data which are existing in higher education institutions. Normally we have all these open source data. You really need to take advantage of what is existing on those platforms. Scale successfully and integration models across the institution, and you design sustainability for involving agile teaching and learning on the ICT aspect. Last, policy and the regulations. Yes, the discussion has been going on, but there is a critical aspect of policy and the decision makers to buy in the idea. This is very paramount. Developing a guideline policy for the implementation of AI in teaching, learning, to student support is very critical. However, the policies need to be developed after, during implementation, not before implementation, to serve as a constraint. Advocate the policies, ensure innovations, collaboration between higher education, industrial, and the government. Lastly is to integrate artificial policies linked with SDGs, African agendas, BRICS development, so that we position ourselves to tap the opportunity. Last but not least, as a closing remark, yes, there is this paranoia of people being scared that artificial intelligence is going to take our jobs, it's going to harm our existence, but we don't have a choice. What I can say is, those who are going to embark on artificial intelligence are going to overtake those who will put aside artificial intelligence. With those few remarks, thank you for listening. That ends my presentation.
Thank you, Prof. That's very insightful. I know we have questions about application of AI in higher learning, higher education, and most of the fear was how do we apply AI to improve our research capabilities. Now, you know, nowadays there's a school, people think like AI will ease our life, you just copy and paste, and will compromise the quality of our education. But I leave that question after the next presentation from Dr. Fimbombaya. He will tell us about how can we empower African countries using IoT frameworks. We know technologies are interdependent, AI and IoT, but let me pose one thing. I know you're tired, but I've agreed with my panelists. We won't leave this stage until we get 3 questions for each panelist. So while Dr. Fimbombaya is winding up his presentation, would this side please prepare 1 question? This side please prepare 1 question. I want also this side to prepare 1 question. Samanini wakubwa na wadogo, sisi hatuondoki hapo kwenye stage leo mpaka tupate maswali 3. Karibu Dr. Fimbombaya. Naombeni muandae hilo swali. Moja kwa Mr. Bat, moja kwa profesa pale, na moja kwa presentation of art. Ili situtoke hapa haraka.